But I wanted to kind of close out our session today and discuss why the Antichrist is associated with technology. Why is he not associated with something else? Another process, another thing. Why is he always associated with chips or Neuralink or things like that? Because you could read Revelation or, and you probably could come to another conclusion about it. But when we understand the occult science behind Antichrist, we can very quickly understand why the Antichrist is associated with machines and technology. So let's get into that. So we now understand that the Antichrist isn't like a wave of energy. The Antichrist isn't like a metaphor for like human selfishness or some kind of, metaphor for the shadow self. The Antichrist is a being. He's an entity that embodies a specific kind of evil and will incarnate as direct opposition to Christ when he incarnated. So the Antichrist, now I'm going to be using the anthroposophical system here. So the Antichrist actually emerges from the subnatural world, something called the subatomic world or the subnatural world or the realm of death. Okay, so that's actually where Ahriman or the Antichrist emerges from. And that's actually where demonic entities also emerge from. They emerge from Hades. They emerge from this underworld, the world of death, the subnatural kingdom of life. Now, the subnatural world operates in a very specific way. It operates like a machine. It operates mechanically, soullessly. So that's actually the nature of the world of death. And Ahriman emerges as death itself. Okay, so Christ is life. Christ emerges from heaven, from the supernatural world. And Ahriman emerges from the underworld, from death, from the subnatural world. To place it even further, we can lay it out like this. You have the natural world, okay, which is where we are. We live in the natural world. Above us is what is called the supernatural world. This is the realm of the angels, of spiritual beings, and it's also the heavenly planes in which our soul can ascend into upon death. It's also often called Devachan in the East. That's the supernatural world. Beneath the natural world and beneath the supernatural world is this subnatural world. This is a world of entropy, of decay, of death, of inversion, of an unzipping. It's also associated oftentimes with the moon plane. It's also where parasitic entities that work against the natural and supernatural world exist. And natural science tends to obsess over the earthly mechanical level at the expense of spirit. So natural science, and why in anthroposophy it's associated with sort of like Satanism or the Ahrimanic nature, is that natural science doesn't include a holistic worldview of the supernatural plane. It only includes the natural world, and then it often gets pulled into the subnatural world. So it only operates often within that spectrum. Now, And so when you're looking at the creation of of machines, mechanical things, you're automatically foraying into the subnatural world. When we start to create these golems, these devices, they start becoming mechanical. We start to directly tap into that subnatural world. When we give processes to things, when we have electricity and magnetism running through things, and especially with devices that have electricity and magnetism. Electricity and magnetism, and actually radioactivity, are dying ethers. Electricity is dying light. And magnetism and radioactivity are also dying ethers. They're decaying. So when you start having these mechanical things that have electricity running through them and magnetism, you're starting to really pull very, very, very heavily from the subnatural world. You're creating really an imbalance in the world at large, and also, of course, in the human being. And Rudolf Steiner says very clearly in his analysis of Ahriman and the subnatural world that the more that humanity wants to develop all of these machines, all of these technologies, we want to electrify the earth, we want to radiate the earth, we have to go equally as far up into spiritual realization. So there should be no technological development further than we are spiritually developed. But what ends up happening is people develop these technologies, nuclear technologies, maybe even some free energy devices, even the use of electricity and magnetism, especially at very high levels. And they start tearing in to the subnatural world, the subatomic plane, the hell realm. And they start to become possessed very quickly through their interaction with these forces that come through machines, that come through the electricity and the magnetism, especially when someone is not attuned enough to handle the exposure to that kind of power. So then people become possessed by beings from the lower planes by developing technologies without the right spiritual attunement. And then they seek to fulfill Ahriman's goals, the Antichrist's goals. Ahriman is the Antichrist in the anthroposophical system. And I highly recommend, if you want to learn about Antichrist and really have that deep perspective, it's going to be through the anthroposophical system. I think that Rudolf Steiner brought this forward like no other spiritual teacher. And so if you want these deep answers into why machines and technology are so ingrained in this conversation, it's in the anthroposophical system. It's in Rudolf Steiner's work. We're just only going to scratch on it a very small little bit today. So the hell world, the subatomic world, the world of death, the world of decay, the world of entropy, it operates like a machine, like a devouring machine. It has a machine-like quality because it's soulless. The I, the higher development, does not exist in a complete way in that realm. I also talk about this in my Electric Apocalypse lecture, which I'll link below. So there's a very good reason why the Antichrist is associated with machines and technology, is because that's literally the essence and the characteristic and the qualities in which he operates in the subnatural world. Now, angels and the supernatural world only operate through humanity. They operate through human beings. They don't operate through machines. And this is why I speak so much and say, listen, your chat bot isn't your spirit guide. It's not your Ouija board. Because technology has a tendency to pull incredibly into the darker planes for the reasons I have just mentioned. It's not a neutral device. You're not looking at some neutral device. You're looking at something that leans and pulls by its very nature into the hell realms. what could be called the hell realms, to be a bit more dramatic. Humanity cannot create something that is perfect and neutral. We are not perfect, so we don't create perfect things. We create, if anything, imperfect things. So we can't create a device that's like perfectly able to receive angels and stuff like that. Our human body is that device. Our human body is what receives the angels. Our human body is what receives Christ, what receives the supernatural world, because our body, as it is in the image of God. Which is why Ahriman will also seek to destroy it through genetic modification, through transhumanism. Because we are in the image of God. And we directly interface with these spiritual beings. We don't need any devices to do that. And in fact, the more you try to use these devices, the more you will atrophy. And you will not develop your psychic organs at all, because you're outsourcing that development and that connection to a device, and then you will have no choice but to eventually merge with it because you have not developed those organs yourself. So machines and technology really become like shells as well to draw in entities from this lower world. So that is why the Antichrist is associated with technology. He is like a being of that. And as I've said on my platform, and as I've said here, in proper human spiritual development, we enter into the Christ. We enter into the body of Christ. That's what it means to eat of his body. It means to literally digest our materiality with his immateriality. We're literally digesting him and becoming like him. And we enter into his body, into his resurrection body. And we become immortal as he is. But Ahriman tells you something different. He's building a body too, but his body is out of electricity. It's a machine body. It's a machine hive mind. And to enter into his body, you have to give up your individuality. You have to give up your development. So one is a black sun antechamber, which is Ahriman, and the other one is a white sun, Christ, life that we become. And both of these paths will be before you. And you're going to have to choose which one you will walk. And whatever system you go into, there will always be those two paths. There aren't any more. There is life and there is death. Okay? Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. And Ahriman is the lie and the death and the undoing. That's the Antichrist. So I want to read to you a couple things that Rudolf Steiner has said about Ahriman, or the Antichrist, and technology. And then we're going to close out by going through and reading some more of your comments. Okay, and don't forget to give this video a like, share it, subscribe, and sign up for my newsletter, make a donation, do all the things. Okay. So Rudolf Steiner talks about this connection between the Antichrist and technology and human development. And essentially we create life, when we create these lifeless mechanical forms that draw in demonic entities, we have to strive and raise ourselves even further, even higher into the supernatural world. So it's okay to develop technology, but when we do that, we have to reach just as far into the supernatural world and understand God and be dedicated to God and that journey just as much as we are to technology, which is not what we're seeing today. We're seeing people who are admitted atheists, people who don't even think that there is a God. And they're getting captured into science and hollow intellectualism. And they're focusing their energy into the subnatural world through that behavior and drawing themselves deeper and deeper into that. And when they start using technologies, especially the more advanced they become very captured in this lower kingdom of life, in the subnatural world. The entities begin to move deeper and deeper into their heart. So this is what Rudolf Steiner says, and this is from GA 26, From Nature to Subnature. And he says, in the age of technical science, hitherto, the possibility of finding a true relationship to the Armonic civilization or the Antichrist civilization has escaped man. He must find the strength, the inner force of knowledge, in order to not be overcome by Ahriman, to not be overcome by the Antichrist. In this increasingly technical civilization, he must understand subnature for what it really is. This he can only do if he rises in spiritual knowledge at least as far into the extra-earthly supernature as he has descended, in the technical sciences, into subnature. The age requires a knowledge transcending nature because in its inner life it must come to grips with a life content which has sunk far beneath nature, a life content whose influences is perilous. In the age when there was not yet a technical industry independent of true nature, man found the spirit within his view of nature, but the technical processes emancipating themselves from nature caused him to stare more and more fixedly at the mechanical and material, which now became for him the really scientific realm. So it's like the more that we create these inventions, these technologies, these things, the more we project ourselves into them, the more we project ourselves outward. And these things are empty. These are mechanical things. These are empty things. So we're sort of entrapping ourselves in this, what he would call the eighth sphere. But through our focus, we're sort of moving more and more into this disconnected, unnatural way of life through these things we're creating, right? Because, just because you're using like metal or something doesn't mean it's a natural object, right? In this mechanical material domain, all the divine spiritual beings connected with the origin of human evolution are completely absent. The purely harmonic dominates this sphere. So in order for something to have life, okay, so you don't want to project into things that don't have life, right? Life, in order for something to have life, it has to have blood, it has to have spirit. There's very specific conditions which create life and allow life. And machines do not have that. It doesn't mean that they're worthless. It doesn't mean that they should be pushed aside or not used. But it is this interacting and relating with machines as though they do have life, as though that they are more than they are, that creates this bond of your I, of your soul essence with certain elementals in the machines, and it gets your energy going in a way that is completely inverted. To think that a computer is spiritual or something when it has no life, you're placing a computer or like an iPad or something as an angel. You're trying to replace an angel and your relationship with an angel with a device. Do you see how that doesn't work? All the divine spiritual beings connected with the origin of human evolution are completely absent. And they're absent because the computer is not divinely created in their image. It's just created in humanity's image, not God's image, right? Humanity is not God. The purely harmonic dominates this sphere. In the science of spirit, we now create another sphere in which there is no harmonic element. So when we actually connect with angels, when we have everything in its proper place, we create a sphere of life in where the harmonic element doesn't exist, which is the counter sphere we're looking to bring about. It is just by receiving in knowledge this spirituality to which the harmonic powers have no access that man is strengthened to confront Ahriman within the world. So again, the more we build up our spiritual life, the more immunity and the more we can see the Antichrist and transhumanism for what it really is. Now, this is also an excellent book on Antichrist and why it is associated with technology, why it is associated with electricity. This is why you see tech bros. This is why you see this influx of technology, and people are saying that it is satanic. People are saying this is the work of Antichrist. Well, this book, it's called The Electronic Doppelganger, The Mystery of the Double in the Age of the Internet. And this is a compilation of Rudolf Steiner. It's by Temple Lodge. And this was going to give you also a very good understanding on the esoteric side, why the Antichrist is associated with electricity, magnetism, and the internet, and this whole piece that's coming in 2025. I also want to read to you, oops, hope I didn't lose that, from this book. I think I might have, no. I also want to read to you about subnature in this one here. So this is the transformation of evil and the subterranean spheres of the earth. This is also a very good reference for just understanding the nature of that subatomic, subhuman world that the Antichrist emerges from, because we learn about his character and how he operates from the realm in which he emerges. So I'm just going to read to you some little snippets so you can get a feel for it. So, our future task must be to confront the solely earthly mechanical forces that are now starting to be unleashed, and even the sub-earthly powers of a present and future super technology, referred to in the statement that this is a world which emancipates itself from nature in a downwards direction. So what they're saying here is that the world of technology and our focus and our the way we interact with it is creating a secondary sphere, an artificial sphere. It's sometimes called the eighth sphere. So how we're interacting with our devices, how we do it unconsciously, the forces that are involved is actually creating an eighth sphere, a subsphere of development. And this also becomes augmented when super technologies are created. But this sphere is regressive. It's a sphere of devolution because it draws humanity downwards rather than upwards. So in what we just read from Rudolf Steiner, Steiner is saying, build a spiritual life, connect with God, unite with the spiritual world, and that will build around you the spiritual sphere. And this is how you operate in a healthy way. This is how you have clear sight. This is how you evolve, is through spiritual life. But then we're also learning at this point in our development that our future task must be to confront the solely earthly mechanical forces that are now starting to be unleashed, and even the sub-earthly powers of a present and future super technology. So the super technologies we develop draw us downward into the subnatural world. They make us one with Antichrist, one with the entity that is Antichrist. Okay, and then I read this final part, and then we will move on to your comments. Now, this is talking about the sort of beginning of the world. And the beginning of the world, how the cosmos evolves and how the earth evolves, is a fundamental teaching in Esoterica, because we get to see very closely the forces that are involved in creation and evolution. And that also helps us understand Christ and Antichrist as well. So this gets into the structure of the earth and the development of the earth and the cosmos. He says, at the very primal beginnings, when Saturn formed out of the cosmic body, the innermost 3 layers of the interior of the earth formed, which is where primal evil is centered. I'm going to read that one more time. At the very primal beginnings, when Saturn formed out of the cosmic body, the innermost 3 layers of the interior of the earth formed, where primal evil is centered. So the formation of the earth, and this is also leading into subnature, is united with the formation of the cosmos itself in a very specific way. And the very core of the earth is associated with Saturn development, the forces of Saturn, and where primal evil is centered. Accordingly, in the 3 uppermost layers of the earth, one finds the counter forces to all forces of physical structure and development, of etheric life, and of the astrality or soul. Further down, we find the spiritual counter forces to those creative archetypal realms of the spirit realm, which, as divine thoughts, constitute the spiritual principles of nature and human beings, as described in Rudolf Steiner's book, Theosophy. Whereas the noble and divine aim of all upper powers in the human being is divine fulfillment and perfection, these sub-earthly powers, in contrast, aim to create a negative 7-fold or 9-fold counter entity to the human being, and thus also the real Antichrist, who is at the same time the anti-humanus. I'll read that one more time. Whereas the noble and divine aim of all upper powers in the human being in his divine fulfillment is his divine fulfillment and whereas the noble and divine aim of all upper powers in the human being in his divine fulfillment and perfection, these sub-earthly powers, in contrast, aim to create a negative 7-fold or negative 9-fold counter entity. So they're creating an inversion. The spiritual forces in the subnatural world, the forces of evil in the subnatural world, which is located at the spiritual center of the earth, the core of the earth, are looking to create a counter entity, an anti-human entity, an entity that is everything that humanity is not, a death entity. and thus also the real Antichrist, who is at the same time anti-humanus. Paul spoke about this entity and his preparation by the mysteries of evil in chapter 2 of the second epistle to the Thessalonians. It is a shocking apocalypse. So he goes in there and talks about the different passages that talk about it, and Paul speaking about it. So there is the real creation over time, or kind of summoning, establishing of a completely and totally anti-human entity, which is Antichrist. And I think that this idea that Antichrist is just your shadow self, like it's a psychological concept, is so dangerous, because then we're not prepared for this literal incarnation of this being that incarnates as a polar response to the incarnation of Christ. So if you have the incarnation of Christ, and through that incarnation, the complete liberation and glorification of humanity, you're also going to have in planetary development the incarnation of Antichrist, who is the exact inversion of the Christ. And we have to experience that. And he becomes like a Pied Piper, pulling people away from the true development. And one of the things that he does is he uses all of the old systems, all of the old lunar ways. And it's that comfort, it's actually that feeling of comfort that makes people most vulnerable. And we should be at our edge in the sense of challenging ourselves to clear ourselves, to unite with the Christ.